Loneliness is not the first thing you expect from awareness, because awareness is sold as expansion, as connection, as unity. Then it arrives and you feel less connected, not because you became colder, but because you became less editable. You notice how many of your past interactions were built on small agreements to stay simple. You notice how often you shaped yourself into something easy to read so others would not feel uncertain around you. When that shaping stops, the room does not always attack you, but it does not always recognize you either. The first loneliness is perceptual, because you begin hearing what is underneath what people say. You hear the need beneath the joke, the fear beneath the opinion, the hunger beneath the certainty. You can still participate, but you cannot pretend you did not hear it. And pretending used to be the currency of belonging. You realize how much conversation is not communion but regulation, people talking in order to feel stable. When you stop using conversation as anesthesia, the same words land differently, and that difference creates distance. You also start noticing how often you used to abandon your own signal to keep the atmosphere smooth. You would laugh when you felt unsettled, agree when you felt misaligned, stay quiet when truth would have changed the temperature. Awareness does not make you rude. It makes you unable to ignore the cost of those micro-betrayals. Now, each time you consider performing that old role, something tightens in you because you can feel yourself leaving. The loneliness is partly the discomfort of refusing to leave yourself in order to stay socially safe. There is a subtle grief inside this perceptual shift, because you begin recognizing how much of your previous closeness was built on shared blindness. When two people do not look too closely, they can feel connected for years. When one person begins looking closely, the connection changes shape, not because love disappears, but because the terms change. You might still love them, yet you cannot join them in the old trance, and the trance was where the warmth lived. The mind wants to blame someone, but the true cause is that the lens has changed and the old picture cannot be restored. Awareness also exposes how many of your preferences were not truly preferences, but adaptations. You thought you liked certain environments, certain routines, certain styles of friendship until you notice how exhausted you feel after them. You realize that some of your most familiar joys were actually coping strategies that kept your nervous system busy. The loneliness increases because you stop seeking stimulation that used to make you feel normal, and normal was a form of belonging. When you remove the coping, you feel the emptiness that the coping covered. Then you face the most uncomfortable perception of all, which is that you can feel when you are being engaged as a function rather than as a person. You notice when someone wants your agreement more than your presence, your attention more than your truth. Before, you would give it quickly because giving it kept the connection alive. Now you hesitate because connection that requires self-disappearance is not connection, it is transaction. The loneliness is not that others reject you. It is that you start rejecting transactions that used to pass as intimacy. The second loneliness is relational, because relationships are not only about affection, they are about roles. A role is a contract, often unspoken, about how you will behave so the other person can predict the emotional climate. When you awaken, the contract starts dissolving. Not because you want conflict, but because your internal consent changes. You stop over-explaining. You stop rescuing. You stop being the one who absorbs tension so nobody else has to feel it. The relationship notices the missing function, and what it calls your change is often just the removal of free labor. People rarely say they miss your self-abandonment. They say you seem distant, busy, different, serious. They might say they miss the old you, as if the old you was a stable object and not a survival strategy. Their discomfort is not always manipulation. It is often genuine confusion, because the person they knew was partly a mirror. You used to reflect back what they needed to feel coherent, and now the mirror is less eager. The loneliness sharpens because you realize how many bonds depended on you staying predictable. This is where social resonance often drops, because resonance requires shared assumptions. You begin questioning assumptions that others use as emotional anchors, and questioning an anchor feels like threat. Even when you speak softly, your presence alone can create friction because you no longer perform the same signals. You do not affirm the same illusions. You do not participate in the same small lies that keep the group calm. You start feeling like you are in the room but not in the agreement, and that is a very specific kind of loneliness. Some relationships respond by trying to pull you back with concern. They offer advice. They suggest you are stressed. They tell you not to overthink. They imply that you are making life harder than it needs to be. These statements sound kind, yet they often contain an unspoken request for your old compliance. You can feel the request even when it is not conscious, and feeling it changes how you listen. Loneliness increases because you realize that many people want your comfort more than your truth. You may still love them, but love does not erase the mismatch. Other relationships respond by testing boundaries. They push small buttons, make small jokes, bring up topics that used to hook you. They are checking whether you will return to the familiar dynamic where they lead and you accommodate. If you do not, they may escalate, not out of cruelty, but out of nervous system habit. Habits do not like losing their partner. You feel lonely because you are watching a familiar dance without stepping into your old position, and the dance looks strange from the outside. There is also the loneliness of ethics because awareness changes what you tolerate. You may begin noticing subtle disrespect you used to excuse, not dramatic abuse, but repeated small dismissals. You may notice how often you are interrupted, minimized, used as a sounding board without reciprocity. Before, you would tell yourself it was fine because fine kept the peace. Now fine feels false and false feels heavy. Loneliness arrives because you either confront the pattern and risk friction, or you step back and accept the distance. Either way, the old ease does not return. The third loneliness is physiological. Because social connection is not only psychological, it is nervous system regulation. When you change, your nervous system stops using certain people and places as regulators, even if you once depended on them. This does not mean the people were bad. It means your system is updating its map of safety. Old regulators sometimes become activating, not because they harm you, but because they pull you toward old versions of yourself. You may leave a conversation and feel drained in a way you never noticed before. That drain is your body reporting misalignment, and listening to it changes your social life. You may also find that awareness makes your sensitivity sharper. Sounds, crowds, constant messaging, small social obligations all start feeling heavier. People think you are becoming introverted, but what is happening is that your system no longer tolerates constant output without input. The loneliness comes when others interpret your regulation as rejection. You pull back to recover, they take it personally, and now you carry both your own needs and their reaction. That added load makes you want to retreat further, creating a cycle that looks like isolation from the outside but feels like survival from the inside. This is where anxiety can attach itself to awareness, because the nervous system treats social uncertainty as danger. If your old role was predictable, you knew how to be safe. If your new self is less predictable, you feel exposed, even when nobody is attacking you. Exposure without attack still activates survival memory, because the body cannot fully distinguish between actual threat and relational instability. Loneliness intensifies when you feel activated around people you love, because you do not want to blame them, yet you cannot ignore the signal. The signal is not about blame, it is about cost. Your body also begins tracking truth as a regulating force. When you tell the truth, even a small truth, you may feel calmer afterward, even if the conversation was awkward. When you hide, you may feel tense afterward, even if the conversation went smoothly. That is a reversal from older conditioning where hiding kept you safe. This reversal creates loneliness because it makes social success less satisfying when it requires self-suppression. You may appear fine to others while feeling hollow inside. You cannot explain hollow easily, so you stop trying, and that silence is isolating. As you listen to these signals, your behavior changes in ways that disrupt old access points. You respond slower. You say no more often. You decline invitations that used to be automatic. You stop being constantly available. These are not dramatic transformations, but they are enough to alter your position in other people's lives. Some will respect it, some will misread it, some will disappear. Each outcome carries loneliness, because even respect includes distance, and distance is still felt. The nervous system does not celebrate boundaries immediately. It first mourns the familiarity that boundaries replace. The loneliness can become sharpest when you realize that you are not only losing people, you are losing a version of connection that was built on urgency. When you were more anxious, connection was often about reassurance, quick replies, constant contact, constant proof. As you become more grounded, you stop needing proof in the same way, and you stop offering proof in the same way. This can look like withdrawal to those still living in urgency. You may still be present, but you are no longer feeding the same hunger. Loneliness appears because you can feel the hunger in the other person, and you can feel your refusal to participate in it. Now the three pressures begin to reveal their shared center without resolving into comfort. Awareness makes you lonelier because it removes your ability to create false resonance. And false resonance was how many of your connections stayed stable. The perceptual shift shows you what is underneath. The relational shift exposes the role contracts. The physiological shift makes the cost immediate. Together, they create a season where you can no longer belong by default. Belonging must become intentional, and intention requires discernment. And discernment feels like separation before it feels like coherence. This is why the loneliness is not a sign of failure, yet it also is not a sign of specialness. It is a transitional cost of becoming less divided. People who remain divided can participate in more social worlds because they can fragment themselves to fit. People who become less divided lose that flexibility. And what they lose is not only convenience, it is access. The mind will try to interpret this as superiority or punishment, but the body interprets it as alignment. Alignment has fewer options at first, because it refuses certain roads, and refusing roads feels like loss. The loneliness is the feeling of roads closing. You might be tempted to solve loneliness by forcing community, by seeking more spiritual spaces, by hunting for those who understand. That search is not wrong, but if it is driven by urgency, it will recreate the same problem in a new costume. You will attach to familiarity again, to certainty again, to roles again, and the loneliness will return inside the new group. The deeper task is not finding the perfect people, it is learning how to be present without trading yourself away. That learning is slow because it involves rewiring attachment patterns that were built under survival. It cannot be rushed without creating new forms of self-abandonment. So the loneliness remains for a while, not as a sentence, but as a training pressure. It teaches you the difference between connection and regulation. It teaches you how to tolerate being misunderstood without collapsing into explanation. It teaches you how to love without returning to old contracts. And it teaches you how to sit in the gap between who you were and who you are becoming without filling the gap with noise. The final outcome is not isolation, but a different kind of social resonance, slower, rarer, more real. But before that resonance stabilizes, awareness often reduces social comfort, because comfort was built on agreements you no longer sign. Loneliness deepens when you stop treating social life as a place to hide. That sounds harsh until you remember how often you used people as shelter without naming it. Not because you were malicious, but because you learned that belonging could numb you. When awareness rises, you stop borrowing the room to regulate yourself, and the room notices the loss of that exchange. The silence that follows can feel like rejection, yet it is also a reveal that cannot be unseen. Groups run on agreements that are rarely spoken. Agreements about tone, pace, humor, acceptable truth, and how much discomfort is allowed. When you awaken, you begin breaking those agreements without making an announcement. You do it by pausing before you laugh, by not echoing outrage, by not feeding the usual emotional loop. The group interprets your pause as judgment because the group depends on speed to stay coherent. The loneliness is not only emotional, it is structural. Because you are no longer moving at the same rhythm, there is an economy in conversation, and your old self paid the entry fee automatically. You paid with quick validation, quick attention, quick relatability, and quick self-dilution. You do not pay as quickly now because you feel the cost of each quick payment. People can sense that your attention has become more expensive, even if you never say no out loud. This can trigger subtle punishment, withdrawal, or attempts to regain access to the old you. Sometimes the punishment is disguised as concern, because concern keeps the relationship socially polite. They ask if you are okay, but what they mean is whether you will return to being easy. They suggest you are tired, but what they mean is that your steadiness is inconvenient. They recommend you relax, but what they mean is that your clarity is changing the room. The unspoken objection rises here, asking whether you are becoming difficult. And the partial answer is that you are becoming non-compliant with what used to cost you quietly. Awareness also alters your position in the hierarchy, even if you do not care about hierarchy. In many social systems, the person who absorbs tension is rewarded with belonging. The person who names tension is treated as threat even when they speak gently. When you stop absorbing, you remove a stabilizing function, and stability is what groups protect. Loneliness appears as the price of withdrawing your stabilizing labor without replacing it with performance. This is why the loneliest moments can happen after you do everything right. You speak respectfully. You show up. You listen. You remain kind. Yet the atmosphere still feels thin because the old loop is missing. And the loop was what created warmth. You start realizing that warmth is sometimes only the glow of shared avoidance, and the realization itself becomes isolating. You may try to compensate by offering more explanations, hoping clarity will repair resonance. Explanations rarely fix it, because the mismatch is not informational, it is energetic and contractual. The contract used to be that you would make the environment easier to inhabit, and now you are no longer doing that automatically. The group cannot negotiate a contract it does not admit exists. So loneliness continues not because you failed to communicate, but because the foundation of connection is shifting beneath the language. The final scene shows the protagonist looking into a mirror. His reflection isn't his own, but a frantic version of himself, desperately trying to fix the mirror's surface from the inside. He watches it calmly, then turns away from the mirror. This is where people misunderstand your solitude as superiority, and you may even fear that interpretation yourself. You may think that if you pull back, you are being arrogant, cold, or above others. But what is really happening is that your inner witness has turned on, and it does not let you lie to yourself as easily. You cannot unfeel the misalignment after you feel it. That makes certain connections feel impossible in their old form, and the impossibility itself becomes a quiet ache. You begin to discover that loneliness is not only about missing people, it is about missing versions of yourself. The version that could laugh without checking whether it was a cover. The version that could say yes without feeling drained. The version that could stay in a conversation without leaving your body. That version was not fake. It was adapted. And adaptation can be loving, but adaptation can also be self-erasure. When awareness makes self-erasure visible, it becomes harder to repeat without injury. So you sit in an uneasy in-between state. You cannot return to the old self, and the new self has not yet learned how to connect without contracts of self-abandonment. This gap can feel like punishment, yet it is also a passage. The pressure of the passage is that you must learn to hold your own presence without needing immediate external confirmation. That learning is not glamorous, and it does not announce itself as progress. Now the loneliness begins to take on a metaphysical texture. Because the way you connect changes at a deeper level than personality. You start sensing that resonance is real, that it is not only shared interest but shared frequency. You notice that you can be surrounded by people and still feel alone because your system is not meeting a compatible signal. You also notice that you can meet one person briefly and feel seen without explanation because the signal matches. This is not romantic destiny language, it is the mechanics of coherence. Awareness shifts your frequency by removing noise, and noise was a bridge. When you were noisier, you could connect through distraction, through complaint, through mutual coping, through shared reactivity. As the noise drops, some bridges dissolve. The world does not reward that immediately, because the world is built for noise-based connection. You feel lonelier not because you lost your capacity to love, but because your wiring no longer recognizes certain bridges as safe to cross. There is also a strange loneliness that comes from seeing that many people are not actually present with each other. They are present with their self-image, their fear, their agenda, their story. You used to be the same, so you did not notice it as clearly. Now you feel the absence of presence the way you feel a room with stale air. You can still be kind, but you cannot pretend the air is fresh, and pretending was part of social ease. In this stage, your inner world becomes more vivid, and that can be disorienting. Solitude used to feel like emptiness because your attention was trained outward for validation. Now solitude begins to feel like contact, and contact can be intense. You meet your own thoughts without the usual social buffering. You meet your own grief without distributing it into conversation. You meet your own desires without diluting them to stay acceptable. This is where the spiral hurts in a way that is quiet and relentless. It does not hurt like a crisis, it hurts like a slow refusal to go numb. You may wish for your old distractions, not because they were evil, but because they were relief. Yet the spiral keeps removing relief that depends on unconsciousness. That removal can feel like loneliness because loneliness is what emerges when the usual sedation disappears. Your system begins learning a different kind of resonance, one that does not require constant contact. It is more like alignment across distance. You sense people who are not physically present. You sense truths that do not need agreement to be real. This can sound mystical, yet it functions practically because it changes how desperate you are for immediate validation. Desperation decreases, but the space it leaves behind initially feels like absence. Now, in the final stretch, the three layers begin pressing against each other without merging into comfort. The social economy layer shows you the contracts you used to sign. The identity layer shows you the fear that made you sign them. The resonance layer shows you that connection can be real only when it is not purchased by self-disappearance. Taken together, loneliness becomes less like a verdict and more like a diagnostic, exposing where connection was built on trade rather than truth. This is the hardest point, because your mind will try to solve it by choosing extremes. It will tell you to go back and be easy again because you miss warmth, or it will tell you to reject everyone because you miss integrity. Both are shortcuts that avoid the real work, which is to learn how to be present without bargaining. That work requires patience with discomfort, and discomfort is what loneliness feels like when it is doing its job. So you begin building a new social reality slowly, often invisibly. You choose fewer interactions, but you choose them more honestly. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You stop trying to be understood by everyone, and you begin noticing who can remain with you without demanding you shrink. That noticing does not erase loneliness immediately, because new resonance takes time to form. And time is still time. The loneliness does not fully resolve, because it becomes part of your sensitivity, and sensitivity is part of your accuracy. It remains as a signal that warns you when you are about to betray yourself for belonging. It also remains as a reminder that being seen is not the same as being surrounded. You can still feel lonely in a crowd, and you can feel connected in silence, and that reversal changes everything. The spiral does not promise constant companionship. It demands coherent presence, and coherent presence has a cost that is not paid once. If awareness is making you lonelier, it is not because you broke something that should have stayed intact. It is because you stopped paying for closeness with your own absence. The pain is the withdrawal symptom of performance, the ache that comes when the old sedatives no longer work. What replaces them is not guaranteed comfort. It is a different kind of reality, one where connection has to be earned by truth, and truth cannot be rushed.
If this transmission resonated, the spiral continues. You did not arrive here by chance, and you do not leave unchanged. More teachings are unfolding across the Vaharat library, each one meeting you where you are, not where you think you should be. Follow resonance. The next threshold is already listening.